Following the guide from the HMS Hood Association, there are a number of portholes that need to be corrected. Fortunately, they are all on the port side of the ship. The port side of the ship had a slightly different arrangement of portholes compared to the starboard side of the ship. This involves closing a few of the portholes that are molded into the hull, and then opening up a few in some other locations. To start, I'm going to mark off the portholes that need to be filled. It's not really necessary to mark the portholes before I fill them. I only do this because I find it easier to work with the marker while referring to the picture. I'm going to fill the holes with Tamiya plastic putty applied with a toothpick. I think it's a bit of a mistake for me to be doing this now. I probably should have done this before installing the degassing cable, but I didn't, although it's fortunate that this putty does sand very easily. So even if it is very close to the degassing cable, it shouldn't give too much trouble. Moving to the stern of the ship, there are only 2 portholes that need to be closed. That should do it. I now need to leave this putty to dry for a bit so that I can sand it. There's not a lot of putty here, so it should dry very quickly. I'm using masking tape to create a line for which the very bottom of the porthole must touch. This will help me keep every porthole at the same level and in the correct alignment. I'm now going to mark the new locations for the portholes on the tape first, and then I'm going to precisely place them onto the hull. I need to make 4 portholes on the bow of the ship and 3 on the stern. The trick with these portholes is to not drill them to be perpendicular with the face of the hull. For example, the portholes at the bow of the ship are on an angled piece of hull, and if they were drilled to be perpendicular to that angled piece of hull, they'll be pointing down towards the water instead of pointing out level with the water. And that means you need to come at a bit of an angle to the face of the hull. I'm not drilling these portholes all the way through into the hull. I'm drilling them to the same depth as the molded portholes. In the past, I actually haven't drilled the portholes all the way through into the hull. I filled them with black paint or black panel liner instead. I'm not sure that there's anything to gain or lose by using either method. This is just the way I've always done it. If anyone has a good reason for why I should drill out all the portholes, then please leave a comment. The only reason I can think of is if you wanted to make an illuminated ship and put lights inside the hull. Then when you would turn on the light would shine out of the porthole and that would create the illuminated effect. But other than that, I can't think of a reason why you would want to drill through the portholes. With the new portholes drilled in, the tape can now be removed, and once the putty has set, it can be sanded. Before sanding, I cover up the details around the molded portholes with masking tape to try and preserve their detail during the sanding process. This is an easy way of protecting those details. With light sanding, the sandpaper won't make it through the masking tape before I've removed the excess putty. This video is part of a build series on the HMS Hood. If you are enjoying this video and would like to see other videos in this build series, then follow the link to the playlist in the cards above. If you have questions that you would like me to answer, then feel free to post them in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe to help the channel. When sanding, I'm using very light pressure. This is 240 grit sandpaper. The very coarse grit will do all of the work. Once finished sanding with the 240 grit sandpaper, I'll move on to a 400 grit sandpaper to smooth out the surface and help remove the scratches from the 240 grit sandpaper. And then I'll finish with a 1000 grit sandpaper to get the surface ready for paint. Before sanding with the 1000 grit sanding sponge, I remove the masking tape. This sanding sponge is going to be used to finish the surface, and I want the edges to be blended together so that I get a consistent surface for the paint. This does mean that I'll be running the sandpaper over some fine details, but with light pressure and not over sanding, those details will be preserved. After finishing the bow, I move on to the stern. I follow the same procedure. I mask off the details that I want to retain with masking tape, I then sand through with 240 grit, then 400 grit sandpaper. That's unfortunate. It's so much easier to see it going wrong from this camera angle. It wasn't so easy to see the degassing cable lifting off the hull from where I'm sitting. Anyways, it shouldn't be too difficult to fix. So, what I'm going to do is finish sanding, and then once I've finished sanding, I'll come back and fix this section of degassing cable. Okay, now that the sanding's done, let's see what I can do about this degassing cable. It's quite mangled at the base over here, so I'm not too sure that I should even try and straighten this out. Fortunately, I do have a lot of degassing cable left over, so I should be able to reconstruct this section with a new piece of degassing cable. This piece of degassing cable has plenty of length, so I just need to cut it down to size and then glue it in the gap. So I'm going to start with that. I'm going to cut it off and then test fit a new section. I'm going to use the same technique that I used to glue down pretty much all of the other degassing cable. If you haven't seen that video, it's the one prior to this one in the video series. Go check it out. The technique is that I put the piece of degassing cable in place dry and then use extra thin superglue applied with a wire to bond it in place. There's a visible gap in the degassing cable at the forward end of the repair, so I need to correct that. To fill the gap, I use a very small amount of Tamiya plastic putty, and then I shape it with a toothpick. Once the putty has dried, I smooth off the surface with sandpaper. Once painted, that repair will be invisible. That is all for this video. In the next video, I'll install the rudder and the skegs. If you would like to support this channel or see how this model looks when it is completed, then please subscribe. Thanks for watching. Cheers.